as part of our roadmap process in the area of robotics and automation in bioprocesses. As just to put this into perspective, at that roadmap meeting that's going to happen November 19th in Durham, we'll be discussing the 4 project topic areas that were chosen during our technology workshop 3, with the same topic of robotics and automation in bioprocesses. And the purpose of today's webinar is to have James Colley from BPOG to tell us how the process will go forward in terms of our main goal, which is to deeper dive into those 4 topics that were discussed and chosen in the Technology Workshop 3, and create project topics that Nimble would launch in order to have an impact on industry. So in a minute here, I'll pass the baton to James so he can do the presentation. I just want to remind you that this webinar is being recorded so that we can make it available to our members that could not attend the webinar today. So with that, I think we have a good list of all the folks that, said that they would register and log in today. So I want to pass it on to James for the formal presentation. James.
Thank you very much, Ruben. And thank you all very much for your time this morning. And depending on your time zones, I suppose. So yes, as Ruben said, we are planning this workshop in November, and we're going to try and expand these topics and fill in more information and get you more towards a point where they are project proposals or at least prototypes for that. So today's presentation, I'll probably speak for 20-25 minutes or something of those lines, and then there'll be plenty of time afterwards for questions. We've had a similar seminar for a big data topic, which will be running in parallel in North Carolina, and so based on the need there for people to have a chat afterwards, we're going to split up the time in that fashion. But please do speak up if you have any questions, and of course there's the chat facility through Cisco Systems as well. So if you've got any questions, then my colleagues over there in the States will be bringing them to my attention, because I can't see the chat myself, so there may be a bit of delay there. We'll see what we can do. I'm sure it'll be fine. So moving on, here's the agenda for this call. The main aim is to inform and request expertise that follow an event. So it might be that you are the right people and you are the people that we need in that room in North Carolina, but you may feel that you want to go back within your organization and identify someone based on what you've heard today. So hopefully we'll arm you with enough information to make those decisions. We're going to give you an introduction to the program, talk about the plan, the timescales, and those deliverables, with the key deliverable being the immediate execution of projects. So we really are looking to get something practical going, to get those test beds going, for example, with ARM as quickly as possible. Thank you to those of you who were able to fill in the survey results. So I think we were up to 25 when I checked this morning. We'll give you the feedback on those, and we'll show you how people felt about the different topics that we have. And then we'll just talk briefly about the background information, so the environment in which we are making these decisions. So I'm sure you're all aware there are a number of existing roadmaps. Nimble published 3 of their own last year, and Bioforum, we have the Global Technology Roadmap, and there's others out there as well. So just to bring your attention to those, and there'll be a slide in this deck which will come out to you, and that will have live links to these roadmaps. If you are interested in doing that background reading, then I think it really does pay off in the one-day events, so that we sort of can hit the ground running. At the very end, then there's one slide then just talking about the expertise. So again, if you may feel that you want to send a colleague or come yourself, and that should tell you what's needed and tell you also the exact resources that are required in the near-term future. So we'll have a call just before the November the 19th event, because for a one-day we really have to start off. We don't want to spend too much time that morning doing an introduction to the whole scene. So we're going to try and pack that into a call before the event so that we can really be ready to go and make the most of that whole day we've got together in Durham. So we are the Bioforum team, and I probably just should say, so BPOG and Bioforum are basically the same thing. It's effectively been a rebrand. So we were BPOG, and we are now Bioforum. If you hear me using those words, please mentally use them interchangeably. Heather is our roadmap component facilitator and program manager, so she won't be able to travel to North Carolina. It'll be myself and Graham Moody. Graham, unfortunately, and Heather can't be with us today because they are traveling over to California for another face-to-face event. Graham is also Bioforum's facilitator for our own robotics project that we're looking into at the moment. So we see this as a really good way to coordinate what we're doing in Bioforum, what we're doing in Nimble, and leverage the work that's been there already. So it's always been a strong principle within Nimble and within the relationship they have with Bioforum that we need to leverage what's being done. And I think my next slide talks to that a little bit. This is the project definitions pathway. So this is how we intend to get to these defined projects, which you can see here in the circle. So on the left-hand side, you can see we have Nimble roadmaps that have been written, and they were around vaccines, ADC, bispecifics, and gene therapy that came out last year. There are other roadmaps, white papers, there's various documents that feed these decisions, and there's the Bioforum roadmap and their own white papers. So those three boxes put input to these Nimble technology workshops, the ECI, the CHI, and the other meetings. From those meetings, those of you who were at the robotics workshop on the 5th of September, we were able to pull out these 4 topics. Through a series of brainstorming activities, we've got down to a prioritized list. Bioforum is an example of me writing BPOG when I should write Bioforum. Bioforum is in a partnership with provide the facilitation for these these pieces of work. So we're currently around that project definition work, and we also provide the facilitation around the Nimble road mapping. So that's how that's how we are connected in this capacity. The project definition, the final output is to create projects. So these may be launched via Nimble's RFP process, which you're probably familiar with, or they may just become Nimble initiated projects. And I really think that we need to get through this workshop in North Carolina before we can really nail down what's what and which, if there are projects there that are really ready to become Nimble. So if they're ready to become collaborative projects between multiple members of Nimble, or whether it's something that they want to launch into their RFP. Will that be 3.2 or 4.0? I'm not sure of the numbering, but into a subsequent one. The Big Data Topic Program has been rolling on now since May. So the planning is being fairly continuous. We've opened communications with the organisations in June. Some of you may have been at or are familiar with the TW2 workshop, which was around big data. And I would imagine many of you were at TW3, the robotics workshop in September. You can see that roughly in the middle there with that gold pentagon shape. The survey is out, and we're leaving that as an open survey. So we're not going to shut it down. If anybody feels that they haven't had a chance yet, then please do go in there and give us your opinions and give us your thoughts, because we can continue to consider those as we develop the program for the workshop. The phase we're in at the moment is highlighted in yellow: collecting data and discussing. So we've had a preliminary discussion between ourselves and the team at Nimble, and we will continue to do that as topics come in. So another 8 people had filled in the survey between the time we spoke on Friday and now. So it's a bit of a movable feast at the moment.
A quick question. This is Brock Osdonner from ARM. Does it make sense to include an area, quote unquote, other in the survey, in case for people who couldn't participate in the workshop have, different ideas they can suggest? If there is just one-off suggestions, we don't necessarily need to consider those, but I'm just saying that should we leave that door open?
So we are that door open. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, I'm saying let's leave that door open in case if there are additional things that we missed during the workshop when we are identifying these 4 topics.
Okay, well,
Yes, this is Ruben. Yes, absolutely. We're looking for those ideas. I've forgotten if in that particular survey there was a space for new ideas. I thought there was.
there is a facility for that. So there's 2 questions at the end, and one of them is around, yes, do you have any project ideas, and the other one was around, do you have any topics that you would like to be included? So yes, the survey will remain open. I would imagine we'll close it around the time of the face-to-face, because if there are things that come up in the workshop, then that's part of our job as facilitators, is to capture and record those and make sure any good ideas do rise to the top. So yeah,
That's excellent.
we will endeavour to hold on to that information. So just going through this timeline again. The onboarding call will be, in the first, it'll be a week or so before the event on the 19th of November, so maybe around the 12th. We haven't put that in yet, and we'll do a similar job that we're doing here. It'll be recorded, so those of you who can't make it, we'll try and make that available for you as quickly as possible, so you can catch up, maybe listen to it as you're traveling or something of that nature. The one-day face-to-face is in Durham on the 19th of November, and I'm sure you've all got the details on that. And following that face-to-face, we're going to those project ideas towards written proposals. So I think with the big data one, there was a more obvious understanding for myself that some of them were at different stages of their development. Some of the ideas seemed very close to being something that could be submitted as a project idea. Some of them were more, I don't want to say vague, but some of them needed more work, I suppose, in terms of development. So if we have a similar situation here with robotics, and that period after the face-to-face is where we're going to be driving everything forward as much as we can, so that we're looking into resource planning and we're looking into the practicalities of getting those projects done. And our end date for this is the 17th or 18th of March. It's around that period in the 2020. So we'll be looking to wrap everything up then. Depending on when the project's in, I think what's important for you guys is to realize that over that period there'll be some demand on your time. Traditionally with Bioforum projects, we may have a call once every 2 weeks. So something along that nature, but it will be determined by the status that the projects are at.
James, sorry, I keep interrupting, asking questions, but so after the one-day workshop, when you say offline proposal development with teams, do you mean that we are going to be facilitating these proposal developments, or that we're going to put a call for proposals out, and then the March deadline is for people to submit those proposals?
No, this timeline is specifically around the facilitation that Bioforum are providing to Nimble about developing these 4 big data topics. So if some of them need extra work to get them to the stage where they are describing in detail a project, so not actually a submitted proposal, but being a complete idea, I suppose, then that's what we need to achieve. Some of the projects might be more readily at that stage, so some of them might not need us to do the facilitation, and it really does develop on the work it really does depend on the workshop itself, how much we can get done there, whether we see an appetite for these projects. If we see maybe something could come up in the face-to-face that group think, that's not something we want to work with. So we can't commit really to driving things forward until we are sure that there's enough people there to take projects on. So it's an opportunity for us really to continue working together if there's an appetite to do that.
Okay, so if I understand this correctly, then the March deadline we are putting on to ourselves is much more for forming a call for proposals, understanding the projects better, and identifying the areas and elaborating on them better to to form a call for proposals rather than external project proposals being submitted. Maybe Ruben, you may be able to answer this thing.
I'm about to weigh in on this. Yes, we're going to have a chance to discuss, as James said, 4 projects that have now been identified of interest. Before Nimble can launch those projects, we really need to have a lot more information than just the topic name. We would like to, during that period between November, during the roadmap, and then forward between November and February, to dig down and do the best we can to identify what work needs to be done. We call that the work breakdown system. If it's a long project that may take 2 or 3 years, what are the potential metrics that we'll need after year 1, year 2, and year 3 to move forward? We need to identify what resources we're going to need in terms of personnel, areas of expertise, potential partners, the team the type of team that would be necessary to achieve that. And then finally, a very clear idea of what the impact of this project would be on the biopharmaceutical industry. So as you can imagine, we're not going to be able to do all of that on November 19th. So what we anticipate is that we'll have small working groups that will not be meeting in person necessarily, but we'll be able to exchange drafts of these projects. And then these drafts will be done by the end of February, beginning of March. So I wouldn't call this an RFP because whatever is being produced there can go 2 ways. Either we take a project that's described and put it in an RFP later on in 2020, or we may adopt it as we call it Nimble-led or Nimble-initiated project. But at that, we can't choose that. We can't make that decision until we have a more clearer idea of what's involved in each particular project. So I hope that makes it a little bit clearer.
Yeah, I got it. Yes, it does. I mean, of course, the terminology, becomes confusing when we talk about project proposals and so forth in multiple ways, but it's now crystal clear. Thank you very much.
We're looking for project descriptions at this point.
Excellent. Thank you, Ruben. Yeah, I suppose that timeline there is not really a deadline for you guys. It's more of a deadline for me at the moment, and that's the time frame we're operating towards. Yeah, and I think Ruben's explained that very well. So let's move on. To reiterate that idea about the main goal. So yeah, we want to develop a project description. So but that's going to require a plan for Nimble. We're going to need those resources looked at. We're going to need to know who can work on it, what's required, what the costings are, and these sorts of things. So in doing that, project descriptions will be taken forward through a process. Try and tease that information out and to see how far we can get on the day in terms of answering some of these questions. I'm not going to show the templates that we're developing for the workshop themselves, but there is a series of exercises that we're going to go through with you guys to try and fill out that information. The main goal is to have a plan for Nimble to work with ARM, so the Advanced Robotics Manufacturing System, to establish these test beds. So it really is about implementing projects. I think that's one of the key words in this statement. So hopefully that's clear. Hopefully that's understood what the deliverables are. So moving on to the survey, we've had 25 respondents, and there was a series of questions there asking you about to what extent are these topics something that your organizations want to work on. As with the big data survey, we didn't really see a great pattern leaping out between what was and what wasn't a hot topic. So it's pretty even across the board, as you can see there, with a slightly increased vote for the response to process upset alarms. The vote isn't particularly high, I would say. So this does make me think that potentially that there's a broader field of topics here than we've seen in big data, where it's much more nailed down. But I would reiterate the idea that these have come from a substantial workshop that was done carried out in September the 5th. So there is a reason why we're going with these 4 topics. Having said that, the other data that has been filled in is something that Ruben and the leadership team at Nimble will be considering. So just to give you an example of the sort of information that we're looking at the moment, other topics that should be considered, we have a full list. We had the list that was full as of Friday, and there are other elements that have come into these. So we'll be looking at these and considering them, whether those 4 topics may already incorporate the elements that are discussed here, or whether these need to be teased out as individuals. We did also ask you, as we mentioned earlier, if you have suggestions for, that should be robotics topics, I do apologize. And again, we have a certain number of comments that have come back from that need consideration, and again, we'll be continuing to look at those as they develop over the coming weeks. So the 4 topics that we've looked at are around automation of microbial control and other testing methods, automated aseptic filling processes, response to process upset alarms, and inoculum handling systems. So as you guys know, these things don't stand alone, and we were very keen to cross over the 2 workshops that we have going on in North Carolina, to give you guys an opportunity to see how these overlaps can be managed and how different projects can be leveraged into each other. So, for example, if you're looking at process upset alarms, then there are going to be important connections to things like plug and play, to analytics and sensors, real-time control. We really see an integrated web of these topics, so they really don't stand alone, and we need to be very aware of that in the workshop, to see where we can see linkages, where we can utilize work that exists or work that's going on, and where projects will be best developed by a wider sort of perspective. On top of that, we need to consider the current technology projects in Nimble. So advanced robotics for manufacturing is obviously a very high priority here. For the big data topics, Spider 2.0 is going to be critical, and the BTEC facilities, the testbed opportunities there. And again, the roadmap in the documents that are available, again, I would encourage you to have a read through those if you could, even if it's only the exact summary of the technology roadmap. It's well worth doing, and I think it will hopefully summarize the environment which we're working in here. So this slide will come out to you, and it has the links to those Nimble roadmaps, which you can go ahead and download from the Nimble website. Likewise, the Bioforum Global Technology Roadmap can be downloaded here. So the Nimble roadmaps are, I think they're sort of 30 to 40 pages, as I remember. And these global technology roadmap documents I've linked to are a similar size, but there are further links there to more specialized sections, and they're maybe a little less accessible. NCMC wrote a great roadmap there around cell culture. If the robotics is particularly interested in and automation is interested in those areas, then I'd encourage you to go and look at that one. And there are other roadmaps out there. Lyophilization is one that we touched on when we were creating the Nimble roadmaps last year. So that should help you out. Which brings us to nearly to our last slide, the required resources. So we need technical expertise around robotics, automation, and biomanufacturing, and we appreciate that that's not always easy to get. And seemingly, especially with robotics, we're finding it, in Bioforum at least, challenging to find that the people with expertise in the biomanufacturing process as well as the robotics. We need people who have got a vision really of the sector. So what's going on in biomanufacturing, what are the relevant processes, and what robotics is available now that can really drive development and accelerate development in those areas. The dates of the 19th November in Durham is key for the face-to-face, and then as we've described, there is the potential for there to be online team activities through to the first quarter of 2020. So that will be online calls with sub-teams where it's deemed to be necessary. So the face-to-face hopefully will elucidate this and give us an idea of which of these 4 topics we need to really continue to push to get that development, and that others you may not feel that that frequency of meetings is appropriate. But we can talk about that. We can see what fits best, and we can decide at later date what we need to do. Last slide there has my contact details, so please do reach out to me if you have any further questions, if you want to speak offline about this. But we do have a good half hour now left on the call for questions. So we'll open that up to the floor. Would anybody like to ask any questions or have any come in already on the chat?
And just a reminder, folks, if you do want to ask a question, if you could unmute yourself on the WebEx before you ask, just to remind you to do that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I'm always forgetting that.
James, if you can go to slide 13, I want to make a remark here.
Sure. This one.
So finding individual technical expertise under what you list is not going to be very challenging, right? I mean, that's why we are doing this together through ARM, through my access to Carnegie Mellon, because I also have a faculty position there. We can find expertise in robotics and automation. And Nimble, of course, can bring in expertise in biomanufacturing. I think the more challenging thing is the connections between those. For instance, and I can give you a direct, notes here. Out of although we try to get into one of those, short courses and so forth in North Carolina, there was a, like infinite long list. We could never, Arnie, our CTO, and myself, neither of us could attend to any of those courses. And I'm not sure if they were going to be able to give us more full information, but these 4 areas that has been identified, for instance, I personally don't know how they're being done today. So what I'm trying to say is that I can bring, as well as I bring not only other people, but knowledge and understanding on the robotics and automation side myself.
I'm sorry, I'm losing you there. If people could stay on mic, please, on mute, please. Thank you.
But without knowing more about how these processes are done today, and what are the limitations and issues and challenges of these processes, it will be hard for us to give meaningful input even on a one-day workshop.
Certainly.
So how should we fill this? So there is a gap here, knowledge gap. I mean, probably similar things can be said for people in biomanufacturing, their understanding of what robotics could bring.
So I would say we have a series of templates that we've produced and that we're going to use to work around these topics. And one of them is very much like a top level road mapping exercise, where what you will do is set yourself a series of goals. It's difficult to describe these without a visual, but really we ask a series of questions, and one of them is, where do you want to be? So it's what's your vision for the 10 20 year whatever, what's your vision for where robotics is going to go in biomanufacturing? What would you like to see? We then talk about your market trends and your business drivers. So what's really what's causing us to need to get there, and then you go through a process of identifying primarily where. So the road mapping exercise then is about creating a series of steps that gets you from where you are to where you want to be. So we have things that are prepared and ready for people to hopefully draw out that information that you're talking about and describe, and talk about the problems in processes today that people will like to see, or people feel robotics could solve. It is challenging, though. I do appreciate that.
I think that could be helpful, but I mean, I wish to have more information. I mean, now I'm not sure if it's in existence, but for instance, when we started talking about this back maybe 8-9 months ago, Ruben sent us a number of links that we could see some of these processes, general descriptions in YouTube, and that was very helpful to get a good sense and seeing. And then we visited North Carolina, the VTech, and there they, walk us through some portions of the process, and that was very helpful as well. But I'm just saying that if there is any prior reading, videos and things like that on these particular 4 processes that we are discussing here right now, or I'm calling processes, but you understand what I mean, 4 areas, that would be very helpful. And it would not only be helpful to me, once Arnie and I identify whom we should, pull in from the ARM side. First of all, we should watch it, and that will give us a good idea about whom we should pull in from the ARM side to the workshop. But also them watching these things would become, invaluable, so that we can be most productive on the day of the workshop.
Right. Yeah, this is Ruben. I think you make a very good point. This roadmap process will not go very well if we don't have a group that has a combination of both the biomanufacturing skills as well as a group that includes the robotics and automation skills. So we can, I'm going to try to do so, summaries or descriptions of what happens during inoculum handling. I think I can do the same thing for downstream and fill finish. And also testing methods may be a little more difficult, but I think we can send you some material that give you a little bit better idea of how that is actually working right now.
That's excellent.
Right?
Thanks.
I mean, I can think of papers and overall descriptions rather than videos, but I think we can make those available to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barak, sorry. Anybody else? Are there any more? Are there any comments there, Dan, that have come in on the chat?
Yes, we have one. The question is about accessing material from the 5th of September workshop. Ruben, I'll let you chime in. Imagine we can probably also pass that along with the materials you just mentioned.
Right. We have a report from the Technology Workshop 3 that was prepared by the ASEHC, who were the facilitators for that, and we can make that available to you. And that actually has in it some of the description that Barak was asking about regarding where the needs are. So the groups that were there actually did pay attention to the drivers, and they began from a much broader perspective. They were looking at upstream, downstream, analytical, and regulatory aspects, and so therefore they stepped back. And out of those discussions, we had, in fact, these 4 projects come out. So I don't think we need to walk that back, frankly. I think we sort of need to rethink, make sure that the drivers are still the drivers that those folks agreed on, and then spend the time primarily on trying to get the project description moving. I don't anticipate that we need to start all from scratch again. But we can certainly send you that, and the way as you'll see, the slides walk through the thought process by which these 4 projects were identified.
Okay, excellent. So we've got a couple of actions there. Any more questions around the workshop? Okay.
So maybe I'm thinking whether, I should talk to Arnie and we should send a similar blurb for Ruben, you to kind of distribute to Nimble members who are going to be coming to workshop. For instance, one of the things that we keep trying to draw a distinction about is automation versus robotic automation, right? That needs to be clear to people. For instance, on the alarm, responding to alarms, I don't know exactly how this is going to work out, but if it were things is like you're turning on and off things remotely, not necessarily needs a physical interaction as such. You know, you could do this in an automated fashion, but not needing robots. I'm giving that as an example. It may not be a good example. So that's one. The other thing is automation that is currently used in pharmaceutical industries, where let's say you're creating individual pills or packing them, which is a very automated high-speed process that really doesn't require, in most cases, robots, but an automated system. And that also does not belong to what we are trying to do here. So anyhow, I think that we should be clear about some of those things of how robotic automation is, what we are thinking about robotic automation here.
Right, and that would be very useful. And I can tell you, I just heard a talk last Friday, a person from Biogen describing an alarm system for downstream in which the automation was used with a smart system developed, a machine learning system developed by discussions with operators as to what steps to take. But it was a human that touched the buttons and made the connections. And I think that's the kind of device or system that one can imagine eventually might be replaced by robotic responses. But I think the idea of separation of robotic versus automation and considering those solutions, that's perfectly within the realm of what we're looking for.
Ruben, this is Mike Horrigan here as well. If I might just add as well, and apologies, I wasn't in attendance at the previous meeting, but just in reference to big data, obviously it's a hot topic that's out there, but I think it might be good to just bring a bit of focus on what specifically we are talking about in that term, right? Is it data coming from the robotic interactions versus, again, I know I've attended a lot of recent presentations around big data as it relates to lab and process development versus, manufacturing.
Yes.
So I think just maybe to better define that as well going into the workshop and to ensure that we've got maybe the relevant participants there from industry as well, because I know there's a lot of interest in this.
You're right, and that area in parallel with this robotics and automation session, there's a separate session called Big Data Analysis for biopharmaceutical manufacturing. And I think, well, I know that there are a lot of folks very interested in that topic as well. As James pointed out in one of his early slides, you can't separate really one from the other here. So there is overlap, and I think you're absolutely right that we need to keep that in mind.
Sorry, James and Ruben, one question did just come in via the chat. Would it be helpful for groups joining this meeting in North Carolina to prepare a brief poster to present their expertise? How are groups going to be identified?
Well, we're going to, let me see. We don't have it's not a workshop in the sense of having a poster sessions. I think what we can do, however, is ask people's areas of expertise as they do the registration for the final workshop. And I think, in fact, we do that. If you go to the registration page for the November 19th meeting, there is a section there, ask areas of expertise, and whether they want to join the big data or the robotics and automation or portions of the discussion. So that's a good place to do that.
Did we have another question? I thought that somebody was trying to speak earlier. I didn't catch their name.
That call is not going through, guys.
Yeah, I'm afraid it sounds like we're losing them there. The name Andy Smith was coming up. Andy, if you can still hear us, possibly if you could submit a chat question. We're having problems with your audio.
It looks like Andy's going to get ready to type that question in, so we can verify.
Hang on and we'll see what comes up there then.
But a comment came in about to cover the profiles that are listed in the topic areas. I assume an organization may need to send several delegates. Is that accurate?
I don't think we can, well, there'll be a limitation to the number of people that we can have at the event. So, you know, that could potentially be difficult. I would say we don't need all the organizations to cover all of the areas of expertise. As Ruben mentioned earlier, you know, we do need biomanufacturing expertise in the room to guide that sort of conversation around the process and how the process, you know, what the challenges of the current processes are and how we'd like to see those resolved. And we are looking obviously for the expertise from organizations such as ARM to marry that up with the robotics. But I'm afraid we won't be able to accept a lot of people from a lot of organizations. I think we're looking to get a maximum of about 25 people in the room.
Okay. And then a follow-up to that, James and Ruben, what areas should an organization prioritize?
Well, I think if you're in biomanufacturing, if you look at those four topic areas there, to a company, for example, I might want to choose folks that are familiar with upstream inoculum handling, for example, or maybe the downstream fill finish and analytical. Those are the four topic areas. They don't have to bring in maybe people that are familiar generally with one or two of those would be great in biomanufacturing. Companies that in manufacturing that have already thought about these things, they could decide a priori that they would like to spend most of their time working on one of these in particular. You're more interested in than others.
Ruben, on the same line, I think you guys should let us know how many people, you know, from ARM, including ARM members, that we should bring. If you give us saying, okay, you know, 7 people, 8 people, we accordingly will pull in the appropriate members.
Yeah, my guess is half a dozen will be great. That can address most of the current applications of robotics and what's available out there.
Half a dozen member plus me and Arnie, or half a dozen including me and Arnie?
I think you're going to need 8 people or 6 people to get an overall view of.
But we'll try to shoot for a total of 6, and if we feel like there is a really compelling reason for 7 or 8, we'll then circle back to you and discuss that.
Yeah, because that will guarantee that we have a good representation of folks with robotics expertise. The biopharm expertise we have more access to.
Another question come in via chat. Is there a place for the aseptic cell optimized GMP compliant enclosure platform for integrating automated processing unit function machines, robotics, and other automation into the original manual process?
Can you repeat that again, please?
Sure. Is there a place for the aseptic cell optimized GMP compliant enclosure platform for for integrating automated processing unit function machines, robotics, and other automation into the original manual process.
Yeah, from what I'm hearing, the description there, that could fit into all of these 4 areas for sure.
Yeah, Ruben, I can join in on that one because that was on some of the discussion. Sorry. Yep, I think definitely it's the set of things could be applied to traditional products, established products, and also the new and evolving ones. So it may look like different workflows, but that doesn't mean you should get those on the table, but they may end up being separate organizations.
I think this is something that we really ought to bring into the conversation for sure.
Okay, thank you. We've still got 10 minutes left. Do we have any further questions or comments? Okay, well, we'll get the slide deck out to you. You'll have our contact details. If anything does occur to you in the coming days, then please do get in touch, because we have regular meetings with the Nimble leadership team around this workshop and around what we're going to do. So please feel free to keep coming back with your comments and your thoughts. But if there is nothing else, then I'd take this opportunity to thank you all again for your time today. And
I want to thank you also. And so I guess in addition to the slides, what we can send immediately also is the report from Technology Workshop 3, which will give you an idea of the thought process that led to the 4 different topics. And again, also from my end, thank you very much for your time and your willingness to work with us on this important area.
James, by the way, it would be also helpful, especially if you copy and paste the last, comment from the chat in there, because I thought, I felt that's also a compelling area that robotics can be utilized.
I'll see if I can get that. I can't access directly, but presumably, Dan, you might be able to cut that out for us.
Yes, we'll be able to save the chat and we can work that in. Yes.
Super. If you send that to me, Dan, I'll add it to the slides, and there's a couple of updates here as well, and then we can get that out to everybody from the call. Okay, that's excellent. So
James.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, was there one more?
James, sorry. Can I just maybe just make one suggestion as well? Maybe just if we have a list of participants and participating organizations and companies there that can be shared, because my thought is that I know of 1 or 2 Nimble companies, say members, and I'm not sure who from their organization might be participating. And I'm thinking specifically of talking at an automation director level to ensure that some of their individuals are participating. So maybe if we could just share who from what organization is in participation for this effort.
Well, we can send you the folks that signed up today for this webinar. Not all of them may choose to participate on November 19th, but we'll also can make the November 19th list available to all the participants as well.
Okay. Very good.
Excellent. Okay, I think we'll close the call there then if everybody else is happy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.